So like I said, we're going to try to record this, and so we don't have to do it again. So if it comes to questions, just raise your hand, and we can interrupt this. I've done this once before, and I think people seem to enjoy it. It's informational, as you'll see, and I'm glad to see that a number of you that are already in the LTIP program, or several of you that are partners, are here. It's always a question of who to do this for. So let me begin by telling you who I think our audience is.
Check a little bit more. This is speaking to the camera, or good on the camera, but
right. Oh, okay. The
recording will be very loud, but.
Okay, hopefully we can turn that down. It's always a question of who to do this for. There's a variety of audiences. As you know, we have a lot of very loyal employees at Real Capital Solutions, and we value their contribution. And, becoming a partner, as we'll see, and as I'm sure most of you already know, becoming a partner requires extra commitment. And a lot of really smart people are unwilling or unable to do that. So this is really for people that are on what I would call the partner track. And as most of you know, because I recognize most of you, you're either already RCS partners, employee partners, or you're go-getters that would hopefully someday decide to join it. There's a number of people that do a great job here that obviously have decided that, this is probably not going to be their cup of tea, and that's absolutely fine. The company needs a whole variety in the ecosystem. We want our people to be smart, driven, hardworking, and certainly very capable on what they do for a living. We don't expect everybody to be a partner. At the end of the day, I think most healthy organizations have a certain number of partners, somewhere around 20% or 25%. And making a partner is a bit of an effort. So Dan did this slide, which I think really sort of summarizes what being a partner is like. It starts with an acorn and end up with a beautiful oak tree. I think it's appropriate in a couple of ways. First of all, it takes a long time. That's one of the things you'll see, that building wealth is not an instantaneous process. And I think if we get it wrong as a humanity, it's because of the human bias called hyper-discounting of the future. It's something that all of us have that bred into us. And what it really means is that we tend to heavily discount the future and think about the present. And I have to tell you, a lot of my success has been learning how to manage that bias and to do long-term forecasting. So if I leave you with one message, it's to be patient and plant the acorn if you're interested in building wealth. So this talk will be about building wealth more generically. You don't have to be a partner to build wealth. You'll find that it helps. You can build wealth by using a lot of very good principles that are ubiquitous. They matter everywhere. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. I think it's important to know what's at stake. And so, one of the questions you need to be asking yourself is, what do you want out of this meeting? In other words, are you interested in creating wealth? It's not for everybody. Many of us have other interests. All of us do. And in order to get onto the wealth track, as we all know, it's going to require a certain amount of concessions. And you need to sort of define your own what it means, personal success on your own terms. So I can show you one path. It's called building wealth. But like I said, there's a lot of ways of getting joy out of life, and that's just one of them. I'm not trying to sell it. I'm just trying to offer it. And it becomes a deeply personal decision. Setting that long-term goal, if you do decide you want to get on the wealth track or become very successful, and you'll find that that's coincident. Being very successful leads to wealth building, and wealth building depends on being successful. And then once you've set your goal, my advice is you set the goal long-term and you start acting towards it. And you'll find that goals are pretty interesting. They're sort of a form of magic, because once you set them, you begin to realize that they're possible. You begin to overcome the problems that goal setting always ends up happening to you. And but there's sort of a magical relationship between goal setting and achieving a goal. So that's one of the reasons why you want to do that first. And then, of course, the trade-offs. Are you willing to do the hard work in order to make wealth creation a reality? And so, good news is it's your answer, not mine. You get to decide and redecide every day. There's no outside test for this. Nobody's going to be watching you. You're going to be watching yourself. And so, if you decide to do it, the only person you answer to is yourself and your partner at home. And if you have a partner, you definitely want to make sure that he or she are definitely on the same page. You understand what you're doing and the challenges you're taking on. That's something I was very blessed with. I was already in business when I met Cinda some 47 years ago, and she knew how to run life without me. And so as I devoted my time to the family and then, to the business and also the family, she was able to take on a lot of the other burden. And, we were partners in it, but I had her confidence and her support. Without it, I wouldn't be here today. We have a small document here, which we don't give out to everybody. It's called the RCS Leadership Principles. I'd recommend you read them. It's a 2-page thing. It's pretty simple. Frankly, we stole it from a lot of other sources. You can imagine what it says. I've looked at it a few times. I don't hit all of them. I probably hit 70% of them, and some of them more, some of them less, and a few of them I'm clueless on. So, again, it's a self-administered test, but the leadership principles were done in this shop a couple of years ago so that people understood what it took to become a partner, and they apply to building wealth. So the agenda, I'm going to go over the universal factors driving wealth accumulation, because some of them are very, very, very universal, whether you work here or at the post office. And you'll see that a pretty important aspect is the compounding effect, the compounding of hard work, saving, and reinvestment, the discipline of doing that. Then I'm going to cover RCS and real estate, because we're a case study within real estate, and real estate is also a case study. And I think you'll find that both of them have unique aspects to wealth building that you're not going to find in other industries. So one of the reasons why I'm successful is because I picked real estate, and one of the reasons why I'm successful is that I built in a lot of principles at RCS, which turned out to be, pretty important ones. And in fact, if you read Great by Choice, which I would recommend if you're interested in wealth building or, a successful career, I think it's one of the best business books written. And a lot of other people agree with me. Katz, who was the head of Vail Associates, tried to get Jim to give a talk. He couldn't afford it. Vail Associates didn't have enough money. Jim's kind of expensive. But you can read the book, and I think the book is very revealing. Years ago, when we encountered the book, I was shocked at how many of the principles he was talking about we had co-discovered. So he was a professor at Stanford that studied businesses that succeeded and failed. And he picked twin studies, by two airlines, and found that one of them was highly successful, like Southwest Airline, and the other one, which I think Pacific Airways out of California. Very similar time start. One of them succeeded spectacularly, and the other failed. I think if you had put $1,000 into Southwest, it'd be like $1.5 million today. And a lot of companies go out of business. So Jim's done a very good job of outlining what it takes for a company to be successful. And I'm happy to report that, we sort of coincidentally ended up following a lot of his principles. I even gave that to a lot of our advisors and some of our key employees, and they read it and going, "Oh my goodness, we do most of that." There's one thing that I don't do that's a little confusing, because we're successful despite that, but I'll let that go for the time being. The other book is Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0. So it's a book that Jim wrote a number of years ago with a fellow professor at Stanford, and then rewrote it with what he learned recently. And I'm going through that the second time, and it also has some great lessons for senior managers and people that run enterprises. So if you arm yourself with those three documents, I think you have the best library that you need. So I'll go over three real-world examples of wealth building. One is a stock market return that applies for most people. In other words, you take your savings and put it in the Standard & Poor's and just pile it in every year, and you'll see you actually do pretty well. The second one is high return for a 10X company for the shareholders in that company. And that's one that we have good visibility on because Bob Mueller, who you heard at the company meeting, MWH, he ran that for years and built his own wealth and had a good number of engineers that became wealthy by co-investing with him. He insisted that his senior managers co-invest because they had to buy out other senior managers. We don't here. Investing at RCS is your choice. We're happy to offer it. You always make a decision on your own whether you want to do it or not. But you'll see that NWH did quite well for their investors. So I want to show you, if you worked at a really, really good company, smart company, led by a very good CEO, what would happen to you in wealth building. And then finally, we do it for our real estate employee partners today. Okay, so back to the universal factors. I love this quote. There's a couple quotes of Einstein's that I love, but this I've checked this out, the source of it, and it was at a conference. He was asked this question: "What is the most powerful force in the universe?" And somebody recorded it. He didn't actually put it in writing, but we're pretty certain that he actually said this. And what he meant about compound interest, he really meant about the power of time and the power of compounding. So if you remember that one thought, and you take that one thought away, that'll do a lot to guide you. So the factors, I have 6 here, but patience and perseverance is sort of the headline. You should have a plan. I recommend it. Most of you know spreadsheets. It ain't that complicated. We can give you basic spreadsheets because we've developed them. And if you want, we can even work with you a little bit on your plan. We've done that with a couple of employees. It's your spreadsheet. We don't have any interest in having it. We just want to help you develop it. I would recommend that it be reasonably simple and trackable. I'm proud to say that I've advised people. A guy I went on a 25-mile bike with yesterday, I advised, and he was an engineer, and he just bought a lot of 20-year bonds, and he and his wife can live very comfortably to 102 and 104, and they're going to have plenty of money when they're done. And a lot of that, he said yesterday, and I know this is true, started happening about 8 years ago when I was talking to him about how he could do long-term plan. So he has this enormous spreadsheet. You don't have to have one like that. He measures everything. I think even when he buys candy, he puts it on the spreadsheet. So it's become, something more than just a tool. I'd recommend a simple one. If it gets too complicated, you're not going to use it. As you'll see, it's very important to start early. You want to plant that acorn now so that you can enjoy the oak tree. Invest what you can. Obviously, it's a personal decision. If you want a fancy new car, you have the right to do that. But if you want to build wealth, the sooner you get in the game, the more dramatically the results will work for you. This is the hard part. You should have a long-term focus and vision. Believe it or not, I think it's a good idea to have a 30-year plan. I think you can rewrite it. The nice thing about a plan is you're not going to get it right, but that's not the idea. The idea is to get a tool that you iterate, because as you go along, your goals will change, the math will change, you might even change jobs within the company, you might leave the company. But what you'll find is a plan is a learning document. So I started this process maybe, depending on how you want to count it, some 30 or 40 years, well, more like 30 years ago. And you'd be surprised how close we are to the plan. Ian and I are doing it now. Before that, Maria and I did it for about 4 or 5 years. And prior to that, Sharon and I did it for a number of years, which is, okay, where's my wealth goal going? How many loans do I have? How much property? What's the cash flow? Ours are enormously complicated, as Ian will tell you. You hit the compute button, you can go get a cup of coffee. But the long-term focus is, again, fairly powerful. Most people don't do it. That's one of the reasons why it's powerful. I think another element, and this is going to sound self-serving, but I know it to be true, you really need to be part of the best-in-class team. You can do your plan alone. You will do it alone, but your returns are dependent on where you are, what team you're with. It's kind of like playing football. If you play for, a good team, you're going to do well. Play for not good team, you're not going to do well. If you play for a major league team, you're going to do a lot better, etc. And the other thing you got to understand is you need to contribute to the team. Apply your expertise. The better you make the team, the better the team is, and back and forth. Disciplined investing, this is very, very difficult. You try to pick good investments, you're not always going to be successful, and we're not always going to be successful in offering them. We've got a pretty good track record. But be patient, keep your money working. That's pretty important. So stay invested. Endeavor to maintain the high returns. So, in other words, what you need to do is not settle, not get discouraged and say, well, maybe I'll just take this. So shoot for those high returns. You'll be surprised. You can usually get them. So I'll turn this to my own experience now, just as a case study. And I'd like to share with you a little bit why I'm doing it, in other words, the thoughts on my passion and the idea of service. So some of you might ask, why did I? And especially, why am I still doing it? So I think that really comes down to what cause am I serving? And what am I truly passionate about? And as it says, it's not really about the money. Most of you know I can, buy any house I want, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'm not doing it for that. And you'll find that most successful people at the end of the day detach themselves from the money. They might start by watching the money. They might measure the money for a while. They might measure it indefinitely. But I like to think that making money is like playing football. You don't throw the ball because you know you're going to get $100,000 if you make the pass and make zero if you miss the pass. It doesn't actually work that way when you're on the field. Something happens that you become good and you become very satisfied. And with that comes sort of a novel idea that may be a little subtle, which is you yourself become in service. So in other words, you realize that you're throwing the ball to have the team win. If you look at the quarterback, that's not what you're seeing. If you're in his mind at the time, that's probably not what you're experiencing. But if you pull yourself back and you observe it, you realize this guy's putting himself in harm's way. He's working his tail off in order to help the team win. And there's something built into humans that make that very gratifying. So it's hard work. He gets beat up. You could say, well, he makes a lot of money. But I can promise you that when he's in practice, when he's lifting weights, when he's going through all of the discipline, he is in service. He's actually not thinking about the money. So that's a weird switch, right? So plan on the money, but then at the end of the day, be prepared to understand that you're really working for something a little different, and that'll occur naturally. And if you're lucky, you'll feel very satisfied. So in my case, I'm old enough, I can divide my RCS career into two 20-year phases. And so when I started this company in '84, it was, as Judy remembers, and Rudy and a few other old timers, that, it was trying to make RCS successful, to make it succeed, to make it survive. A lot of days working on that. Ultimately that became, I think we have something here. And so to try to make it enduring and to make it a great company, there's an enormous amount of satisfaction that comes with that. But you got to get through a certain amount of pain and fear, and then you get that satisfaction. So, a winning quarterback feels pretty darn good about themselves. They feel good when they're, at home alone. They feel pretty good when they're on the field. They feel pretty good when they're with teammates that are winning. And it's all part of the package. Something happened to me after I succeeded, more or less. It wasn't enough. I had to climb new mountains and everything else. So in other words, success became for me an opportunity to challenge myself and do more success. And there's a lot of satisfaction in that, challenging yourself, I promise you. Pain initially, but I wouldn't say that my life is filled with much pain, to be honest. I had bad moments, a lot of bad things happen. We got money in a lot of different banks, so I'm wondering, I wonder if that money's safe or that money's safe, So I'm not saying that, we don't have that. But in general, my son approached me today and said, how was your day? I said, it was good. And it really was. So on balance, the things that happen that sort of set you back, some people might think is stressful. I just think it's part of the game. So I've adapted to it. But the next 20 years, or the last 20 years, I should say, my focus has been and will continue to be on philanthropy, the foundations. So I've given myself, and my wife Cinda is way ahead of me on this. As you know, we're going to give the vast majority of our wealth to try to make the world a better place. We each have definitions of what that means. But, we feel pretty darn good about that. We feel, in fact, privileged. So those are the three foundations. And I think at another time you'll hear some of the people come from the foundations and talk about some of the work we're doing. So the question is, what's your passion? It doesn't have to be any of this stuff. And then the other thing I would caution, don't worry about if it changes. because you start with one goal. After you achieve that goal, chances are you'll reset goals. And that's healthy. And then what it really means is you're stretching yourself. That's another thing about humans. I think we're meant to stretch ourselves. It makes us better. So there's something about challenging yourself that's highly rewarding. Just the process of, I wonder what I can do next. So it's gratifying in a subtle but profound way. Okay, hard things. So, you have to realize that, although you will be doing the hard things, there's rewards. Some of them are obvious: financial independence, personal satisfaction. We talked about that. The subtle joy, we talked about that. And then the next part is the cost, the trade-off. I'd recommend that you consider this statement: subordinate yourself to something larger than you. In my case, it was an ideal that, that this company could really be something, and something that we could all be proud of. I don't talk about that a lot. If I spend 10 hours talking, that doesn't come up. But I can promise you that when I drive home, or when I reflect on it, if I'm on a boat or walking on a beach, there is that I think I can honestly say that, in the business world, I've worked hard and made a contribution, and I feel pretty good about that. But I feel that I can contributed to something that actually isn't about me. I'm of service. I'm actually not. I know I'm the CEO. I'm the owner, but I don't actually visualize myself in that manner. That's not my context. It's not how I walk around saying, I guess let me check my card. I guess I'm the CEO. I'm solving problems. I'm engaged. I'm having fun. I'm not having fun, but, whatever it is, I think that ends up being a pretty big component, and it's one of the positives of the trade-off. So all that time in the weight room starts paying off on the field. And it's worth it, not to everybody. I mean, you put me in the weight room and it wouldn't work so well for me. So, like I said, everybody's got their own definition of success. And so, again, the leadership principle talking about what the sacrifices are. But, the cost is today, but the rewards are in the future. So if you can maintain that perspective, it'll be helpful. I like this last thing. It's called the marshmallow test. Some of you might be aware of it. They ran this study psychologists ran it at Stanford, I think about 40 or 50 years ago. And what they did is they took a 2 or 3 year old and sat him on a chair, and on a table they put a marshmallow on a little dish, and they told the 3 or 4 year old, can't remember, but okay, we're going to come back in 5 minutes, and if you haven't eaten that marshmallow, we'll give you 2. And then they go back and they videotape the kids, and some of them just can't stand it. They have to eat the marshmallow. A number of kids do all sorts of things to distract themselves, and they end up not eating the marshmallow. And they run tests on how those kids turn out, and it's fascinating. It's probably the best test to predict success in the future is a marshmallow test done for early kids. IQ, there's not much evidence that high IQ makes people successful. It's helpful, but it's not powerfully helpful. This particular test turns out to be extremely important on predicting. So none of us know how we would have done, because we're not 2 or 3 anymore. But as it turns out, we're basically advocating the same as adults, and you'll see that. Okay, now to go into the particulars, your team and your industry. So I have 3 scenarios here. You work a normal job in a normal company. So let's say that's the post office. You put your seed capital in the stock market for 35 years. So I call this example 1. And that's the vast majority of America. My friend Michael He was an engineer, had a great family, put his money away in the stock market, got a little worried, put it in the bond market, and we talked about that. So the vast majority of the people that are successful for retirement, and that's only about half the people in America, by the way. The other half, nobody knows what they're going to do when they're 65. Maybe they continue working, need food stamps, et cetera, et cetera. But about half the people have this normal job, normal company. And we'll show you how the numbers work out. Then the other thing is the MWH example, which is you become a partner, so you can't just be an employee. That's number one. But you become a partner, you go for a growing smart manufacturing engineering company. I think that's probably 3 to 5% of people in America. And then the last one is you can partly at a highly successful real estate company that allows you to invest alongside the owner. So that's example 3. And real estate, as you'll see, is a pretty important aspect to it. I promise you that if I was in number 2, and I was in the manufacturing company for a while, and I'm not nearly as good a CEO as Bob Euler is. So Bob Euler is up here, I'm down there, but because I was in the right industry and I figured certain things out, my returns are much higher, as you'll see. But in any of the 3 cases, if you act and think long term, you'll retire comfortably. Better yet, if you can be in 2 or 3, you can reach for becoming a partner, becoming wealthy. Depends on what you mean by wealth, obviously. So, assuming you want to do this at RCS, you need seed capital. Okay, that's the hardest part. So I like to, it's sort of an observation. The first 100,000 I made were the hardest money I ever made in my life. Making $1 million was really hard, but not nearly as hard. 10 million, hard, not nearly as hard. 100 million, and so on. And as the odometer goes up, it actually gets easier. Now you wonder, why the hell is that? It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. I agree. There's probably a couple of reasons I don't need to get into, but I can promise you one thing, that the seed capital is the hardest money to place. And so I'm going to talk to you about the discipline and what that is. Unless you have a rich uncle that's willing to give you money to invest. Most of you are on your own. I started that way. On my own, had to create the seed capital. I earned it. And then these are the 6 things: work hard. And as it turns out, work hard develops your expertise and it develops bonuses. So your bonuses go up a little faster. Your salary will accumulate a little faster. You have to prove your ability to add value if you want to be a partner. But in almost every system, unless you're getting screwed, expertise attracts rewards. It will seem to you that organizations are unfair. If they're unfair, you're working for the wrong organization. Most of the organizations ought to recognize contribution and success. They're not going to do it perfectly, and they're not going to do it from your perspective. But basically, they should get that right, or they wouldn't be successful, if you think about it, right? Because their job is to promote the best, to give more responsibility to the best. And as an individual looking at how decisions are made, you might lose faith in that from time to time. But in general, if you watch and you're objective and you take the bigger picture, this should be happening, and usually is happening in my experience. So what that means is you get promoted, you have rapid pay increases. You've got to start saving. So you need to be somewhat frugal. You don't have to live like my wife does, by the way. You can be a lot less frugal than that. And these things are important. If you're going to invest, you want to invest with proven experts. You're going to join a football team and you're going to be a linebacker. You want to make sure you got a good quarterback, right? Otherwise, you're spending a lot of your time, energy, and effort working for people that don't win. You're not going to be on a winning team. And then you got to remain with the best in class. Most of us are tempted. There's a lot of shiny things out there, and, it's tempted. So these are the things we talked about earlier. If you bring those with you, be helpful. Some of these things in red, by the way, are, great by choice that Jim, talks about. So some of you are familiar with the book. So what it takes at RCS, again, we stole some of them or borrowed them from Jim. Personal drive and commitment, that's in leadership principles. He calls it level 5 ambition. Live frugally, invest your bonus. If you think about it, and that's how we ran the math, if you think about it, you should be able to live on your base salary because that's all you get, right? In March, you get a bonus. Well, my theory is you should be able to invest a bonus unless you're pre-spent it or you're waiting for that car. So that's how we're running this, that, most people are going to get a bonus. And if you invest that bonus, that's your seed capital. So it's bullet first, cannonballs later. Stay invested, scale it, recycle your investment. Bullets, then cannonballs. You'll see that it turns into cannonballs. Again, expertise, high-level practice, level 5 ambition. So again, you want to work with somebody who's successful. And then in this particular case, I'd recommend that you apply to become an employee partner. Okay, what it takes or what it took at RCS. And so in our case, it took perfecting the execution. Buy it right, lease it, refinance it, sell it. And so those are the 3 sets of returns. If you invest in the S&P over the last, Dan, I think it was, how many? 40 to 50 years. The average has been 7%. Going forward, it's going to be very volatile for this year and next, but over the long term, I think you can count on that. Most of the people I follow believe it'll be lower, by the way, that we're through, that America is through its great building period, and now we're going to be more like Germany or other countries in Japan where, the returns are lower. So that might be optimistic. MWH, the returns that Bob's engineer employees made and the company made were about 15%. We went over that with Bob. And then RCS, it's been in excess of 20. And so we think it'll be harder to keep in excess of 20. And so we lowered the projections down to 20 because there's a little more room, obviously. You need to act on a deep understanding of the real estate cycle. As we've been worried about the real estate industry, worried about, low interest rates for too long, turning into high interest rates and unbuckling the system. Well, obviously that's happening. And so the most important part of real estate is knowing when to sit on your ass. Because if you go out there and get in what I call in front of the steamroller to pick up shiny things, it'll take you out. And I think we're going to see over the next year or two that those who did not understand the real estate cycle didn't safeguard themselves from the risk, and therefore they're going to experience losses. Discipline, focus on high returns. At this shop, we turn away a lot of deals. We just don't do deals for deals. We look for high returns. Our track record for the employee partners is actually 26.1. I call that fanatic discipline. Mine's lower than that, by the way, but so I have to offer investments, and the employee partners get to sort of pick and choose. And some of them are obviously better than others because we have outside partners and they boost the returns. And so, I do fine. I'm not complaining, but there's a little bit of a better boost, from a historic standpoint. This is important. That's the reason why the returns are high. Because when I studied MWH and said, well, Bob's a better CEO than I am, how can I make more money? I had to come up with an explanation. I went over this, Bob, and he agrees. We leverage banks, right? As you all know, we have great relationships with banks. They trust us, and we treat them properly. And so we're able to take their 5 or 6% and turned it into 26 at the equity level. Without banking, our returns would be a lot smaller. Now, you have to pay the banks off. You have to be rigorous. You have to guarantee your loans, all that stuff. But we do. And then we have partners like Hans that are loyal to us. Hans is interested in returns more like 15, so he allows us and our employees, he wants us to make more money. He wants you guys to do very well because, he's sitting in Germany and he wants somebody who takes care of his investments. He doesn't mind that we make more money than him. He's perfectly fine with that. But without partners or banks, our returns would be lower. We didn't have much banking at MWH, and the partners were all employees, so they weren't able to leverage partners. And so these are things that we've been able to develop. As you know, our investors and our banks are very, very loyal to us because of our reputation, our track record. Frankly, you get to leverage that. You co-invest alongside me. Your dollar is identical to my dollar. I get a guarantee fee, but, you put your dollar of equity next to my dollar of equity, we'll make the same return. So the pitch is you want to be a GP, not an LP. Because LP will make more like 15%, 16, 17, we hope 18, 19. But the GP will make a lot more. So you can benefit from this and, enjoy high returns. So now I'm going to go to the S&P example, and you're going to see that it ain't bad. In fact, I think it's pretty good. So the answer is about 3.9 million if you start at age 40. So what you're doing is you're still working hard. So post office may be a bad example because what we do is we allow the employee to grow their income a little faster than inflation. I think it's 5%. And then what we do is we have them invest their bonuses every year. Maybe not all of their bonuses, but a good share of it. So that as they grow in their job skill, their salary goes up, but their bonuses go up. And we reality tested it for a number of people in the company, and it basically fit. So we can show you the spreadsheet that said, so if you start with a small bonus because you just came out of college, then, maybe you have 10 grand to invest. You don't have a lot, or 15 or 20 or whatever it is. You put that in, then the next year, your bonus goes from 15 to 20, you put that in, and so on. And the whole thing scales. So if you work at a company, you're just, let's say, in the accounting department, but you're ambitious, you work hard, you reinvest your bonuses, this is what you'll end up with between 40 and 65. You start earlier, it gets much better, as you'll see.
How much do you invest at 40?
Your initial investment is very small. Do you remember that? So it sounds 10,000.
Yeah.
It's a good guess. It's 10, 15. Next year it goes up, then it goes up, then it goes up, and you're investing your bonus. Now, obviously you can pull it out. This just runs an algorithm, right? You can decide, I don't need 3.9 million. I think I'll retire at 60, and 2 million's fine for me. It's plenty of money. I'm never going to spend 2 million. And so these are all the choices you have. So anybody can build wealth. That's the message. And I know a number of people in Boulder that are psychologists. I happen to know more psychologists than anything else. And so they don't make a heck of a lot of money. They're overeducated. And I know authors and poets and that kind of stuff. But most of them have been able to save. And they're somewhere around here, but they're going to retire comfortably. They can go to Europe if they want. They can buy a new car every 4 or 5 years. They got a nice house. So it doesn't take 3.9 million. Now, in disclosure, we didn't take any taxes out. So this is sort of a Warren Buffett plan. So what Warren Buffett does is he invests. I think he started at like 14. He's 92 or something like that. So he's got a long term of compounding. And he doesn't sell stocks. The reason he doesn't sell stocks is because he doesn't want to pay taxes. Because he knows that taxes are certain, and he's not certain that said that, Gillette is a better company than Coca-Cola. So if he buys Gillette, he'll make a decision to buy Gillette. And 50 years later, he still owns it. It's changing a little bit as he's donating money to foundations. You get a little bit of a break, but you can do that. So one of the secrets of this is, what you do is you defer the payoff to the tax man. So you invest and you keep that stock. And it's hard to do, by the way. Can you imagine making the decision at 40 and then Cinda had uncles that did that. The guy was about 80 and he was reading the Wall Street Journal and I said, or it was a local paper, but he was reading the stock market. I said, what stock do you own? He said, Boeing. I said, oh, wow. So this is maybe in 75 or 80, probably more like 1980. I said, wow, when did you buy it? He said, I was an attorney for the federal government, and I had to fly all over the place because I was starting power plants all over America, in the 40s and the 50s. And I started using the airplane instead of the train. I thought, this is a great idea. I think I'm going to buy the stock. I bought the stock in 1952. And I figured he had $2-3 million worth of Boeing stock. Just bought it once, didn't see any reason to sell it. So, a lot of people that have that kind of discipline understand that if you go through the tax wash, you can knock that down to maybe 3 million or 2.5. So you want to be careful about taxes if you can. Okay, this is MWH. This is a 10X company. You can see it's much better because now, you end up compounding at 15%. So you end up with about 10.5 million. How many people would say that's wealth building and it would satisfy you? How many of you put up your hand? Yeah, we got several people, a couple of people. Yep. I agree, by the way. Ain't nothing wrong with that. So let's take the same company, let's take the same idea and stack up RCS. Now, in this case, same start at 40, same algorithm, you invest your bonus, and you end up with 21 million at age 65. And that's assuming we knock down the IRR to about 20%, which we think is probably realistic. So obviously, it's about twice as much. As you can see, the power of compounding is nonlinear. You go from 15% to 20%, and the net doubles, right? So that's the power of being disciplined about getting high returns. That's why, let me put it this way. If you play football as hard as you can for a bad team, you're not going to do as well as if you play football as hard as you can for a Super Bowl team. And that's basically what this says is we have a couple of competitive advantages that we talked about that we can lever, and what that does is creates, this person would make, that's what that person would make, and this is what an RCS person would make. So, you want to know the reasons. So now to put a little reality in it, I've gone to a couple of people and at RCS. So we have 3 long-term employees, and we went back. I had Ian go back and look at the returns, and as it turns out, a little better. So since 2013, over the last 9 years, people started, the 3 people started with 220 and reinvested. And the weighted average for these top 3, I call them the 3 more experienced, longer-term investors who have had, I think, the right formula. And one of them, I asked that person to tell us what their recommendation is. But as you can see, the returns are better. And now this is shared among 3 of them. We didn't want to pull anybody, so there, 3 people that that you work with that probably could retire easily if they want. I suspect, depending on the definition of wealth. And again, I think they have some of the same instincts. They're not just doing it for the money. They're doing it because they're good at what they're doing, they enjoy what they're doing, they're adding, they're part of the team, and they feel valued. I don't remind them of that enough, frankly. That's my fault. But I can promise you they're very good. So invest as much as you can afford early in your career. That was one quote. Avoid concentrating investments into a single deal. Diversify, because they don't all work the same. So take your nest egg and divide it. If you only have 10,000, obviously we don't want you doing that. But eventually you're going to have 50 or 100. Invest only what you can afford to lose. I think that's a good principle. But if you think about your bonus, you're not living on it, right? It's a bonus. It's called a bonus for a reason. It's extra. So I think by definition, if you put in your bonus, you're already doing that. But, if your wife wants a new car, then maybe you are. I always push that because I could afford to lose everything. I had a wife that didn't have expectations of being wealthy, so she was happy with where we were, and was, frankly, became a little confused when we made money. So I could afford to lose my nest egg at the beginning, and I figured I was a reasonably bright guy, and I knew I was hardworking, so it wasn't that big a deal. I could either start another company or try to get a job if somebody would have me. And then remember that high rewards and high risk go hand in hand. That's a good quote. You should probably look at it that way. And so if you do decide to invest with a family, I'd recommend you have an honest conversation with your spouse or your partner and say, listen, this is what could happen, but the other thing can happen. And again, there's a certain irony to that once you state it, you grapple with it. It's like problem solving. Once you put the problem on the table, you realize the problem ain't that bad. So if you never made the bonus, like the company didn't do well or whatever, you quit or whatever, you lost the bonus, think about it. It's not like it really went bad. You had an opportunity to invest. And I promise you, once somewhere along here, it changes. You're playing with a lot of house money. At that point in time, you really have a competitive advantage, right? Because you release yourself from that pressure of, oh my goodness, I only have 10,000. But if you've got, let's say, 3 million and you make a mistake, probably not going to make a mistake on all of it. After 40 years, we're not perpetually wrong. We're talking about averages here. We've made a lot of mistakes at RCS, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and all of you are going to make mistakes. That's not the point. In football, every team makes a mistake. Every quarterback makes a mistake. It doesn't matter. It's how you score against the other team that matters. It's not whether you never throw an interception. So I would say that this is, in my view, that's not my quote, but in my view, this is, you discover after a while that this is not quite what it seems. It's good to have the conversation. It's good to make sure that your partner gives you permission to lose. But as it turns out, that permission frees you, and I don't think it's highly likely, to be honest. I don't want to promise you that because anything can happen, and that's true. So this is a good statement. But the point is, over time, I think once you do that, this is advice for the first couple of years. After a while, when you're there, this advice begins diminishing, right? Kind of like, really? You're going to put $3 million in 10 deals, and you're going to lose $300,000 in 10 deals? Really? When's that ever happened? I mean, when's it happened to the idiot down the street, let alone us? But anyway, that's a good statement. So let's go to what the real returns are. I wouldn't recommend wrapping your head around this and considering this real, because there are several factors that we'll probably have to talk about that will diminish returns in the future. But if somebody started at 40 and stayed until they were 65, that 25-year period, the returns are even higher than the 21. They're actually 51. And I see reasons for this, and I see, reasons for this. And so I can't tell you. I can say this feels a little righter to me. If I had to give you advice, if you were my son and came into my office and said, if I invest, what do you think I can make? I'd say, well, you better be able to make 15 or you should work somewhere else. You should make 20 or there's something wrong. And if you're lucky, I can see this because it's been happening. But I wouldn't count on this. But, you probably don't need that. Or if you do, you might have to work a little longer or invest a little more. You still, by the way, in this case, you have a very good life. Your base salary is going up, and it's good, so we're not taking a dime away from the base salary. What I did throughout my career, some of you might know this, I had a rule that I started with 50 years ago. I never paid myself more than my highest paid employee ever in my life. I always had a cap on my salary, and I had a family that had no problem living on that. And so it was just a rule I had, because I saw a lot of people, especially in real estate, get rich and then change that and start spending a lot more. I'm getting a little relaxed in my older age, by the way. But I think for probably 47 of my 50-year business career, I maintained that discipline, and I was able to hit, returns that are, frankly, pretty similar. Okay. So your bonus compensation, we talked about that. Those are the acorns. Be frugal. I'd recommend staying disciplined on living expense anyway. And this is personal. I don't think this is business. I know a lot of people that are wealthy that, like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. I don't, I've met them a few times, but I don't really know them. But the point is, they have Bill has a massive house, building another massive house. He's got a private jet. He's not suffering, and he does fine, a hell of a lot better than me. So a lot of people would say, you don't need to do that. I've noticed that there is a dynamic in there somewhere, that people that focus on creating wealth are also a little disciplined on this. They tend to come together. Deferred gratification requires discipline and patience, but as it turns out, it's sort of its own reward in a fascinating way, because the way I have some friends that are extremely disciplined, very frugal, and have enormous respect for them, and they're not dependent on money. These people are, they're perfectly happy going camping. I mean, very happy, and they're not kind of in the I need money phase. That's an awkward place to be, by the way. So remember that the fulcrum of success is strictly yours. So if you want to buy in and jump on the our wealth machine, you need to become a level 5 player, and then try to become an RCS employee partner if you're not. And so, this is we talked about the normal company, employee partner company. Here's something that Dan had me put together. We all know this guy, right? Now, he takes eat frugally or live frugally to a ridiculous level. I think he's lived at the same house for like 45 years. His idea of treating himself is, he had a good day in the market, he gets a Big Mac instead of a hamburger. Apparently that's real. But you can see what happened to him. This is now he has the advantage of age. So if you go to him at 65, then he's merely worth 16 billion. And his IRR over the long term is 24. But he has two advantages. He didn't start at 40, he started at 14. And as it turns out, that's one of the secrets to this. You can't do anything about your age except invest now. So, we ran everything starting at 40 because, some of you are not quite 40 and many of you are later. And so, you tried to just pick something. He's kind of a sort of a ridiculous person on both of these levels. So I wouldn't want to compare yourself to him. But that's what his compounded return is, 24%. But it shows two things. A, you got to live a long time. B, it's good to be frugal. And C, you want to have a high return. And a lot of people don't know that 24% is because he doesn't pay taxes, hardly at all. Okay, so as we're talking about, success can only be yours in many paths. Are you ready to adopt it? If you do it through discipline and practice, like the quarterback, I really think it becomes fun. People that I know that are successful, I think they're happier. And I know some people that are less happy, but I would say they're less happy and not successful. So they don't work as hard. They're a little more victimized. They're a little more trapped. And so, I think that success can be fulfilling, not just money. But anyway, so this is an important statement. I'm getting older and I'm not going to be around forever. And so the key to wealth building is keeping the company successful. That's the reason we have the LTIP program. That's the reason we have this. I think this is, compare this with the LTIP program. This is a home run, because it's just, you put them both together and it's great. But the point is, this will truly build wealth. And, as we went back there, you saw it. But that is your job as a leader. That's your opportunity. And that's also the principal risk on a go-forward basis. We know what history's been, but guess what? History's behind us. So there you go. It's not about the money. Money is the measurement. It's like the scoreboard on the football game. It's all it is. He doesn't take the scoreboard down, put it in his pocket. The whole team looks at it and says, yes. But, the difference between money and a scoreboard is you can actually spend money, you can't spend the scoreboard. That's about the only difference. So, that's it. Deferred gratification, add value, achievement. Okay. As I was saying, I think it's our most important initiative to building wealth. The compensation, the LTIP, the bonuses, I think you can scratch compensation. They're your seed capital. That's what I would consider them. They're the opportunity to do the top part. And then Dan came up with this. This is, a great quote. Planning without acting is a daydream. Acting without planning is a nightmare. Most of us do the latter. We actually don't have a plan. Get a bonus, we go figure we're going to spend it. Why? Because we got it, right? Well, what? We're stimulus related? I think we are. I think part of the problem with humans is we have biases that are built in that got us here, where they're survival. But I think, to be perfectly honest, I think the human brain has greater capability than we usually use. We resort to stimuli when, in fact, we should set stimuli aside, set our course, and have the world try to adapt to our course, or we do the best to follow our course. I think that's the basic message here. And, of course, are you interested? So at this point, I think I'll turn it over to questions, and I'd be happy to have a discussion with you guys on any questions or concerns you might come up with. Or you could have more shrimp. Yeah,
So let's say I'm bought in, want to be a partner. What's the next step? What do I got to do?
Okay. Well, let's see. Thanks, Steve. Well, I think you have to understand what it takes. So, in other words, every company has a little bit of a different, a different program. Goldman Sachs, you just work your ass off, and they go in the back room, they come out to the cubicle to bring you in, and they sometimes fire you, and sometimes they make you partner. Everybody knows more or less what it takes. In this case, we try to be a little more transparent about it. So I would say understand what the leadership principles are, because those are pretty universal. So if you went to Goldman Sachs, you could apply that. Good chance you'd make partner. I'd recommend you make that personal decision. Like, yeah, you may have already made it, and that makes sense, and therefore you're done. I would socialize it with your supervisor. And I would say, listen, I want you to know that I'm interested. Because, we want people to be partners. We're looking for new partners. They're the people that are going to help us when we're retired. I expect my foundations to have a lot of money here, so I want partners. Partners are the lifeblood. Us old people retire, and new people have to come along. So I would say, ask your boss to consider you. Have a dialogue. Then, figure out what it takes. Okay, we also have a specific document that they can share with you, which is, these are the things we look for. I can't remember what all of them are at the moment, but, adding value. If you can't add value, it's more difficult. So you really have to be able to make a contribution. You're less able to become a partner if you're the water boy on the football team, or if you're the doc, right? We need the doctor, we need the water boy. All those things are true. Cheerleaders, all that stuff's true. But you got to be on the field, and you got to make a contribution. That's important. You have to show a certain amount of leadership and dedication to the enterprise. So, and that's true of success anywhere. Most of us look at the world, we all look at the world through our lens, right? It's actually backwards. If you look at what you're trying to achieve, you're much better off than if you look at what you want out of what you're achieving, because you'll be more successful. So I would say that you want to try to figure out how you can make the company better off, how you can assume more responsibility, how you can get promoted, how you can contribute more, what you can add. Your boss is usually busy. Sometimes they're confused. So you ask how you can help, ask how you can contribute. Your learning curve will go up. You'll benefit from it, I promise you. But, the essential question is, gee, if I were, let's say, Judy or Adam or Ian, what would I want to do to be in the top, let's say 25% of RCS players? If I were them, what would they look for in me if they were nominating me for partner? And then here's what we do. Every year we have nominations. And not everybody who's nominated gets approved. We have a committee. There used to be 5 of us. Now Sharon is out, so there's 4 of us on the committee. And we drill down. We ask questions. Why do you think the person in your department deserves to be partner? Well, I've had the following experience with them. I agree. But what about, when they screwed the pooch on this and the other thing? Well, I think they learned from it. Okay, put that down. So we have we put it on a spreadsheet, knowing us, right? Here's their strengths, here's their weaknesses. We think they have what it takes. Then we vote. And I don't think I've ever seen it not be unanimous. I've seen a few occasions where people bring up a partner and the committee is not quite ready for it. They go, I understand your loyalty. I understand your position. I understand your view. Let's look at this again next year. I'm not convinced about this. I'm not convinced about that. The other two things I see, and I think they're real, but when you make somebody a partner, you don't unmake them partner. You want to make sure that this concern that Peter had or Billy had, you want to make sure that's addressed. So, you know, that's a process that we go through, and it's considered, you know, because, like I said, you're admitted to a group of people that are going to be leading the company in the future, and you think it's, you know, it's privilege, responsibility, right? But does that sort of answer the question? Yeah, good. Anybody got any concerns? Things that bother you, or Brian, what do you think about this? You got any advice for me?
So the one thing kind of going through my head is the 26% or 20% real estate driven returns were experienced during a period of, call it cap rate compression, and in real estate going from maybe a local investment vehicle to an institutional investment vehicle. Right? So you went through a period where yields went down as a result of that phenomenon.
Yep.
And so when you look forward, have we reached the point where cap rates are as low as they go?
They're too low. And it's worse than that. Yeah.
And
gotcha.
If you look forward, can you reasonably expect 20% plus?
Well, here's the good news. That's a very good question. Thank you. That's one of the reasons why we put the 20% in. Well, over a long period of time, my return has been higher than 20%. But that's over almost a 40-year period because we've run the numbers. But it has been trending down in the last couple of years especially. So let me comment on that from a couple of standpoints. Number one, I think you're right. 26% was an unusual era. And the whole market probably went up 15 or 18 or, you know, something like that. I don't quite know. So I think you bring up a very good concern. It's one of the reasons why we marched it down, because of what they call the problem of large numbers. Because you're right.
Tailwind, right?
We had a tailwind. That's definitely true. I think part of the reason why the 26 was good, because my returns were going down during that era. In other words, as we went from the tailwind into 19, 20, 21, and part of it was my strategy of buying credit tenant deals. Okay, but there is an advantage that you have, and the advantage that you have is you get to pick. So in other words, you don't have to take, if Marcel wants to buy for his wife, for example, a safe 20-year bond real estate, you're not going to get 26% at the investor level. You're going to get 12 or 11 or 10 or something like that, right? But guess what? Nobody said you had to buy that. So if you want to, you could buy it and say, hey, listen, I want to sleep at night. I'm happy with 12. It's not wealth building, but you sleep at night.
Will the value add deals have the benefit of that tailwind, right? That would be the question.
That's the question, and it's a good question. So let me move to that. So the first thing is, don't forget, these returns at 26% are higher than mine and have been consistently higher than mine. And the reason they're higher than mine is because you guys have the advantage of selecting from my selections, and you had the advantage of knowing who's investing. When I buy a deal, I don't know if an investor is coming in. When you guys invest, you invest with the investors, and you generally have that privilege of knowing, well, Hans is coming in, so we just turned a 20 into a 26 for Marcel and us, because Hans is coming in, he's going to get a 15. So keep that in mind, that you have a, if you will, a competitive advantage. Now, we're going to try to make the playing field level. One of the things we're going to try to do, for example, on this program, is to make sure that we have enough investments for the employees, because in the past, it's been a dry period for me. I got a lot of cash, as you know, and, the returns haven't been there. In other words, if you invested in 21, you probably feel like an idiot now, probably no matter what you bought in real estate. Which brings me to my second point. So holding that thought, I think we're going through a terrible period. In other words, I think anybody who bought real estate in the last 2 years, unless it was credit, should be happy with a positive number, shouldn't be worried about 21, should be worried about anything greater than 0. Okay? And I think that'll be true for a large part of the first part of this year. So real estate is highly cyclical. So one thing that I would recommend is you hold your cash. There are times when real estate makes very high returns. And I don't mean in the 20s. We've had periods where we made in the 30s, and fairly consistently for a while. And so I think that we have to get through this desert that I predicted a few years ago that didn't happen. Everybody kicked the can down the road. So I think we'll have a period of reasonably low returns that'll turn quickly into high returns. So I think we'll re-enter the period, the exact period you're talking about, where we have a huge headwind because the banks are getting crushed. They're not going to make loans. A lot of people are going to lose their real estate, and we're going to take advantage of that. And so what's going to happen is, if you bought real estate in 21, for the most part, it was a bad idea. If you bought it in 22, for the most part, it was still a bad idea. If you're buying it now, you better be damn careful. There's a good chance it's a bad idea. Now, we found good deals in bad markets, so I think we'll get a few deals that, we'll do better because we have a competitive advantage. We're sitting on an enormous amount of cash. The banks still like us. They don't like anybody, but they like us more than everybody else, so that's good enough. And we're about to come into a period where the returns should exceed 20% for me and you guys. So, Dan, on the apartments, if we buy apartments next year, let's say in the Denver area, over what period of time would the returns be, and what number are we projecting in the apartment plan?
If we're buying at that time?
Well, what's our best time to buy, first of all?
Year end of next year, early 25.
Okay, so let's pick year end of next year.
Between then and 2030, 2031,
High 20s. So that's without investors. We put investors in there, assuming we can find investors. I think we can. If we're buying stuff as cheap as I think we'll be buying, we should be in the 30s and our investors should be in the low 20s.
What's the premise on which that's based? Is it cap rate, buying at higher cap rates with anticipating gradual cap rate compression and rent increases?
Well, we'll have the cap rate expansion already. But yeah, those fundamentals are correct. So we're buying to build that value next time.
Right.
So we get the advantage of vacancy rising, lowering, and definitely pressure.
Yeah, the whole thing is, the whole thing will go ass backwards. And so we had a meeting with probably the best considered apartment guy, and I asked him a couple of he's an appraiser, does a lot of appraisals, and he's marking things down modestly, and I said, that's not what your heart tells you. He goes, well, I can't predict a recession, so I'm not projecting a recession. It's not my job as an appraiser. I said, well, you just told me that you agree with us that, the whole industry is going to get hit by a 2x4, and you're modestly marking down. He says, I got to use comps. He says, I'm not allowed to make this shit up. So if something was worth, $475,000, now I can find comps that suggest it's worth $400,000.
So what do you think cap rates have floated up on apartments in Denver in the last 18 months? Probably high point like 18 months ago.
Yep.
75 to 100 basis points.
Okay.
For that.
So from what to what? Is that like a 4?
Low fours, you high threes. High fours.
And where do you think it maxes out?
So, probably about 150 basis points.
6 or 6.
Yep.
And on some of the hard hit deals, like some of the old constructed stuff, and I know.
Do you think it'll go back down to the 5 level? Because forever and ever it was kind of like we started seeing 5 maybe like 10, 15 years ago after historically 6 and 7.
Well, that's, we're only projecting, I think, so compressing that 75.
Yeah.
So we don't think it goes back to 5. If it does, we're all geniuses.
The idea goes back to my sales presentation, is you got a buy rate.
Right.
So what we're saying is there's going to be great buying opportunities in the next couple of years. We'll get in at the right price, and then fundamentals will improve, and then we'll sell it to the top market. Get 26%.
Buy low, sell high.
Turns out that's important. But most of us don't know the difference. Like Hans says, buy perpetually. And that works a lot of the time. It's like being in a stock market, you average 7. But, if you have, and in me, you have somebody that has a lot of scar tissue, and I've been to a lot of rodeos where, I get stomped on the head, and I don't need that anymore. And so I look at this industry a little different than other players. And you guys were with me when I predicted, a desert. I was stone cold wrong. And I think I know why. You heard it. Now I'm going, looks like maybe I was right, but 2 years off. And so, to Adam's point, if you want to make those high returns, you have to catch the market at the right time. Fortunately, there's an awful lot of players that don't look at the market, even banks. I mean, I talked to some of the, CEOs or the heads of real estate in most of the major banks, and I have to tell you, they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue in September what's coming. I ask them, well, what's your feel for the coming year? Well, we're a little nervous and the feds are all over us. That's it? That's your plan? Yep. We don't see any problems. You don't see them until you see them, but, and I wondered why I got that answer. I got that from several bankers. And in the last downturn, it was the same. You ask bankers if they got any bad deals. No, the other guys got the bad deals. You go around, you never find a bank that's got bad deals. After a while, they're all selling bad deals. But there's something in the human psyche that allows us to deny a future problem, to sort of whistle our way past the graveyard, and soon the other guy's going to get hit. In the Second World War, they figured out that bomber pilots wouldn't get in a plane if the kill rate was more than 50%. They got psychologists. And so if they could keep the kill rate on bombers down to, now they didn't all die, by the way, when bombers went down. A lot of them hit the silk, a lot of them died. But it hit the silk. If they were lucky, they ended up in a prison, a war camp. But the psychologists figured that they would run a number of missions until the kill rate was about 50%, and then send those guys back to the U.S. to train other pilots or over in the U.K. Why? They figured out that every pilot that got into a plane was willing to get in if he could say the following: I might get hit today, but it's more likely Charlie. It's not me, because that's built into us, right? And so when we look at things, the people I talk to, I can't get any of them to be honest about the fact that things are turning to shit and their life is going to turn to shit. And it becomes patently obvious to me, even stuff that we got, we're going to have problems with. I know it, you know. I think we're just very well prepared to solve it. We got smart people, we got tough people, we're going to do the right thing, we're going to work our ass off and get our way through it. And we're going to have to write some checks. I get that. I've been here before. But that's not the ball game. That's before the ball game starts. Then what happens is the worse it gets for us, the better it gets the next year and the year after. So I've been thinking, do I like high interest rates? Going to screw me over. I think I can take that. Because what's going to happen as a subsequent story to that is that real estate's going to get worse, which means our returns are going to get better. And by the way, I do run long-term projections. And guess what? This is probably the last rodeo that I'm going to be able to go to in my life, because they're usually about 15 years apart. There's something about human behavior, systemically, at least in the real estate business, that causes us to do this roughly every 20 years. Sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 25, but you can pretty much count on real estate people getting stupid after a long bull market. It makes us stupid, makes us complacent. We don't, we lack discipline. We think it all belongs to us. We get bored stiff if we're sitting on cash. Look at me. You guys know me. You think I like sitting on cash? Is that who I am? I'd rather go pick a bar fight. But I know that, and I'm not good in the bar fight, by the way, but I know that if I don't sit on cash, I'll feel worse than if I got into a bar fight. And so that's what keeps me and us in a more painful situation. So that's part of the idea of being at the right team. You're not going to hear this in too many shops. You're going to hear averages, okay? It ain't averages. It's like the stock market. There are times when you want to pile in. I don't know. I had 2 stocks. I sold them both about 3 or 4 months ago. I couldn't stand it. I figured, this is a prequel. The downturn's a prequel to a real downturn. Okay? And figured if they're begging me to buy the stock, I'll buy it. But they got to be begging me. Why? Because unless I can make a lot of money, I don't want to lose money. Because they're related. You make a lot of money, you don't have to worry. People with a $9 million, they're going to worry so much. Me, I got to worry even less, right? That's where you want to be. You want to be ahead of it. And you can get there. But Adam's right. It ain't as easy as just doing it, I'll go back to this. It's not going to happen this way. Okay? You're going to have some bad years. You're going to have some great years. You hope the average is, that's not the one we're talking about, right? You hope the average is 20. Okay? That's what you're hoping for. You work your ass off and you get lucky and you come in at the right time. I know it can be higher than that. I've lived through a couple of cycles, and it depends how bad it gets so that I can tell you how good it gets. But, you got to make it through the bad time and then get ready for the good time, because that's when we're going to make huge returns. And so I'd like Emily, write a memo to the file. Let's see how this works out in a couple of years. But I believe that 3 or 4 years from now, let's make it 4 years from now. Let's have a meeting and see if I can convince you then. I don't want to convince you now. I'm just giving you Marcel's bullshit theory. But we'll see. I think 3 or 4 years from now, you guys will say, holy shit, I didn't realize it could get that bad, and I didn't realize it could get that good. That's called leverage. Leverage is your friend when it's going the right way, and it kills you when it's going the wrong way. So half of making money in real estate is taking advantage of stupidity. Half, 2/3 of it. And by the way, we're in good luck on that. There's plenty of it around. arrogance, complacency, and so that's part of our job. You want to be with smart people, like Dan, that gets it, that can run the numbers, and Adam, that's been there before, and me and Judy and others that are disciplined. We've got that built into our DNA. It's a big part of the return, because we could have been piling in 19. What, we were buying credit tenant deals in 19? Who the hell was doing that? 20, it looked like it was smart. 21, we looked dumb again, right? You guys are buying what? And some of those deals aren't that good, by the way, because cap rates went up. I get all that. So timing is extremely important in this industry. You got to know when to go on the field and when to try to win. You got to know when to stay off the field, because there's a lot of times that nobody's going to win.
I had more of a tax-related question.
Sure.
So it's compelling that you mentioned the bonus as an investment vehicle,
Right.
long-term, continue to reinvest it. Is there anything that can be explored in terms of, in lieu of receiving a cash bonus that's taxed, receiving shares that can be redeemed and invested and rolled into that calendar year's deals, or by the end of the year, if you haven't redeemed them, you get that tax hit, you just receive the cash.
That's a great idea. We have a tax guy here.
I'm on vacation.
He's on vacation. We'll get back to you. It's a great idea. I don't know if it works.
Well, it has to do with, are you getting something of value? You can't, it's not subject to forfeiture. So there are things you can look at, but it's, what you're describing is a game with lots of kind of playing on.
Okay.
It's probably,
Sounds
You can look at,
yeah.
if you're getting something that has value, if you don't lose it, you can't put back on.
and then maybe it's confined within that calendar year. You have
Sure.
to get cash
Yeah.
out, you don't have to put it in something.
We'll noodle on it. I think it's a great idea. And think of it. It is true that all of this stuff goes down if you go through the tax wash. Warren Buffett would, what the hell, I can't remember what he was worth, but whatever he was worth. Now, a lot of this, was, no, we just did a compounded return. So that's, I was going to say is it is a big part of my success, frankly, is being able to manage taxes by doing exchanges, as you know. So at a minimum, we want to see if we can enhance it by that. Now that gets a little tricky and convoluted, and but taxes are definitely an issue, and they will bring down the returns. So,
Trying to make my acorn a little bigger.
of course, well, there's a big squirrel called Uncle Sam. Wants to eat a little bit of every acorn. He doesn't want to kill it. He just wants to eat a little bit, and the tree ain't quite as big. So, definitely got that. Anybody else have any questions? Emily, let's call on you. You're new to the company and new to this. Any thoughts or concerns, or how does this strike you?
No, I think it, for someone without a finance background, I think this is a really helpful roadmap for me, for independence.
Right.
I'm a single woman, and I have a brother to take care of in my future, and
Right.
so, without the academic background, this is, very valuable tool.
Gotcha. Okay, good. Let me see. I don't want to put you on the spot, so we'll talk about this later. I would like your feedback on it. How we can make it a little better for you, a little more usable, and something that that makes sense to you. Because, like I said, this is it's for RCS's benefit long term, but for your benefit. And again, I guess if there aren't any other questions, then I would say I want to thank you for bringing us here, because the whole team in this office and people that came before you, like Sharon and others, Ryan, but people helped us build this company, and that's the asset that we have, is the talent in this room. Without that, none of this is possible. I got to tell you, it's a pleasure and an honor to come to work here and spend time with other people that are dedicated and smart. And like I said, in about 4 years, we'll sit down, figure out whose ass got kicked. And I think it'll be ours for about a year. Then the ass kicking will go away, and we'll be the ass kickers. And then I think, like I said, if I had to hazard a guess, and I think I get paid to do that, this is going to be perhaps the biggest rodeo of my life, and the one that moves me into yet another opportunity to become very generous in philanthropy. Because, as you know, I don't really need another dime. So I'm working for 4 foundations pretty soon. And it's a privilege and an honor to do that. But Cinda and I'd like to have an impact. So this is something that I believe in. As many of you know, I get these ideas, and once in a while they work out, and once in a while they don't. But this one I'm feeling stronger and stronger about, that our call and what's happening out there is coming true. And I got to tell you, it's always scary. It's always scary. You're like the bomber pilot going, whoa, I think we got our flak jacket on, don't we? Even if you know you're going to make it through, I got to tell you, it feels terrible because of what you see around you. Now, in a way, we're all consenting adults. The banks that go down, they're consenting adults. Real estate guys and gals that are going to go down, they're consenting adults. This isn't a game like my wife played the first poker game with some friends where she won, I think $4 in pennies, and she couldn't go to sleep because she wanted to give all the money back. And I said, you can't do that because nobody will understand what you're trying to do. It doesn't work that way. I'm not my wife. I'm not going to give the pennies back. It's a fair and square game, and, we intend to win. So I think no matter what, we're going to have a very exciting time. I think Dan's right. I think this will be like popcorn. Maybe the best kernels will be at the end of next year or the beginning of the following year, but there's going to be some popping going on towards the end of this year. There's a lot of opportunities. I suspect we'll be getting calls from banks. I already made an offer on one loan. I got soundly rejected, but I think that's the first phone call. I think after the feds visit them, I may get a second phone call. And so there are a lot of good ways. The way Sharon put it in one of the downturns, I think during the great financial crisis, because we were similarly positioned, and Sharon said, there's always something going on in real estate you can add value to. And she was right. For me, it was kind of like, no, we got to wait. Oh, this is horrible. Nah. If you got money, you got talent, you know how to solve problems, think about it. There's going to be a lot of people scrambling, right? So let me ask you this. I'm going to ask for a show of hands on who thinks that real estate at the end of the year will be better than it is today, and who thinks it'll be worse. So better? Who thinks it'll be worse? I agree. About the same? About the same. Okay. Fair answer. Yep. Well, we'll see. I think it'll be worse. And if it gets worse, guess what happens to our returns if we buy later? The hard part is having all of this money, and some of you also have money you want to invest, and not being able to invest it. Those of you who are 40, you've got 2 or 3 of these rodeos. Probably at least 2. Okay? I don't. My last one, so I want it to be good. I want to go out, having nailed it. There's a bumper sticker, dear Lord, don't let me screw up this real estate downturn like I did the last one. And I think it's good. It's a good bumper sticker. And most of us, we don't follow the bumper sticker. We stay with it. So I think we have a very exciting future at this company because we're set up for it. And again, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming today, and really appreciate it. Thanks.